Hey, what's up everybody? It's about 10:26 or 10:26 on this Saturday morning. Yep. Another Saturday where I get to do the videos in the morning. The reason being my mom's at a conference right now, and also I got plenty of time before my nephews get dropped off. But what I have here in my hands is something I'm pretty sure some of you may know of. If not, then it'll be kind of new to you. The link will be down below. And I don't know if I did this before here on YouTube or not when I talked about this, but if not, this will probably be the first time. But as you can see the title up there, it says Ken Penders reveals what would have been. In other words, Ken Penders 2 years ago on June 23rd, 2010, about 2 years ago almost, a year and a half I should say, going on 2 years ago, was basically looking through his files, and he found this hypothesis, if you will, of stories he planned on leading to 175. So in other words, these are stories. Well, basically, these would have been stories he would have wrote going into 75 and eventually 200. And when you read this, I'll provide the link again down below. But when you hear me bring these out, and then you read them later on, basically read them later on, you'll kind of see that, as some people pointed out, despite how they feel about Ken right now, that he had some very interesting concepts. So this is basically what. He says the following list was submitted to him by Mike Polithro at his request while he was writing the Shadow storyline that saw print in issues 157 and 150 through 159, 157 to 159. And he says, without further ado, I present to you what might have been. So in other words, this is what would have been if he had stayed on. Now, he starts out with Line of Succession, which was issues 155 and 56, 155 and 156, part 1 and 2. He continues on with System Shutdown / Reconfiguration / Reboot, which was 157, 158, and 159, I'm guessing. Now, again, as you read down here, you'll notice that those first two don't have no detail, they don't have no synthesis, if you will. But as we get down to the next issues, the future issues after 159, that's when you start getting some details. You start getting some synthesis, some kind of summary of what would have been. So we start out what would have been 160 and 161 if Ken Penders had stayed on. And it was, and hold on for a second. There we go. And the title of what would have been if Ken Penders was still going, what would have been was called 160 and 161 were entitled originally, from the Ken Penders point of view, All of My Tomorrows. And basically this is the detailed summary or synthesis of what those issues would have been had he stayed on. And I quote, this is the detail of what would have been 160 and 161 if Ken Penders had remained. And I quote, the detailed synthesis of what would have been: King Sonic discovers he's returned to the scene of one of the greatest battles, and possibly the cause of his problems in the future. The problem is that no one could see or hear him, and any attempt to take action results in someone suspecting a supernatural cause. When he returns to the future, he discovers a changed world on top of having failed to change events in the past. As a last resort, Rotor sends Nicole into the past after having created her. So basically, the original idea for issues 160 and 161 was for the Mobius years later Sonic to go back in time and try to do, I guess, try to, I don't know, change something in the past. But according to this, it says if he would have taken action, someone would have suspected supernatural cause. So, and it also kind of gives you an idea right here how Nicole got sent back, or at least one of the ways. So it kind of shows you that Ken Penders, despite how people feel about it, was intending for Mobius years later to be part of the continuity, part of the canon. And I think that's why a lot of people were against it. Especially the writers like Bowlers and Flynn and whoever else, because in their eyes, it would have spoiled everything. Well, guess what? Guess what? Sometimes different kinds of media, comics or television, they do that. Doesn't mean you're going to have a peaceful future, you know what I'm saying? Alright, the next issue would have been like one of those laid-back, relaxed issues, you know, kind of like 222 was. But this would have been issue 162, if Ken Penders was still the head writer, or had been the head writer still. But this is what he had planned for 162 if he was still around. It's called Last Tango in Knothole, and this is the detailed synthesis summary of what he had planned originally for 162. And I quote, "Uncle Chuck and Rosie emerge on the town for a real date, and it's up to Sonic to play guardian angel and prevent Robotnik's stealth bots from spoiling the happy couple's evening." So in other words, it would have been like 222, but with a little Sonic fighting Robotnik and stealth bot action. Now 163, it would have been called, if Ken Penders was still on the book, would have been called Girls Night Out. That's the title of 163 if Ken Penders had remained on. And this is the detailed summary synthesis of what he had planned for that issue. And I quote, "Some teasing from Ash results in Mina and Amy Rose making their way into Robotnik's stronghold to prove they are just as capable on their own as any freedom fighter." In parentheses, it's got re.Sonic. Now, continuing on. When Sally hears what they're up to, she and Sonic head out after them, only to discover Rouge and Nick the Weasel, not Knack, Nick the Weasel are on the scene, each looking to I don't know what he meant by this. Absurd, or basically, I think he meant obtain or something like that. Or secure, that's what he probably meant. Each looking to secure, or basically attain, or basically each looking to absect, or whatever, with the red, basically rendezvous with the red gem, or rare gem I should say, that will power Robotnik's latest weapon. Now, according to what he says in parentheses here, it would have been one issue, 16 pages, or two 11-page stories if spread over 2 issues. So in other words, If it would have gone from 163 to 164, it would have been 11 pages. One issue would have been 16 pages, just like 162 would have been. Now, continuing on, and let me check my time here, I'm pretty sure I'm okay. But continuing on, this is what Ken Penders had planned for 164 had he remained on. This is it. This is what Ken Penders had planned for 164. It's entitled The Robian, the Hedgehog. And that was the title, that was the proposed title Ken had for 164. And here's the detailed synthesis and summary. When Sonic overhears how much his father resents his condition, unable to enjoy a normal life with his wife, Sonic risks all to find a cure. With the aid of his Uncle Chuck, Sonic makes his way into Robotnik's nanotech labs and retrieves what he hopes is the answer to the problem. Unfortunately, Jules is still Robian at the end. Unfortunately, Jules is still a Robian at the end, but thanks to nanotechnology, he now looks more like his old self. So in other words, what they're saying here is what Ken had planned for Jules is that he would still be a Robian, but he would technically kind of look like his old self again, kind of look Mobian-like, kind of flesh and blood-like, except he'd still be robotic. I know, it sounds strange, right? Alright. The next one for 165 is called Last Man Standing. Yeah. Last Man Standing. This is how, hey, you want to know how Ken Penders would have had Bunny and Antoine finally tie the knot? Here you go, right here. It's called 165. This is Ken Penders' way of doing it, called Last Man Standing, if Ken was still working on the book. And I quote the synthesis and summary of what he had planned, Ken Penders had planned. And I quote, Antoine pops the question to Bunny. Unfortunately, she's not able to respond before the gang has to go off on a mission to shut down Robotnik's power plant before a meltdown in the core. While Sonic does all he can to ensure a safe ending for all, circumstances dictate a sacrifice on someone's part. And Snively ends up proving he had more moxie than anyone ever gave him credit for. So this is basically at a time when Snively was on their side. Now again, just like with Girls' Night Out, this would have either been a two-parter or a one-issue deal. Now let me check my video. Okay. Now 166. This is where things might surprise you a little bit. But 166 had Ken Penders still be had Ken Penders still been working on the comic. This is what he had planned for 166, and I will explain that in part 2.